Hi, this is Dr. Eric Fields. I'm a psychologist specializing in gambling addiction, and today I'm discussing why you are still so hell-bent on continuing this compulsive gambling pattern. The past losses for compulsive gamblers can be so triggering, and trying to accept that they've done so much damage can really be a blow to the ego, for lack of a better way of saying it. A lot of times there's this defensive posturing, which is basically blaming gambling for all of their negative consequences, which includes their financial situation. As human beings, we really hate being taken advantage of. We absolutely despise it. And a lot of times, compulsive gamblers will look at gambling as if it were a person trying to take advantage of them. And so their stance is very often to try to get back at this gambling activity, which, when you look at it from an objective point of view, seems kind of irrational and silly because it's not a person trying to take advantage of you. It is as if you think gambling owes you something. Think of it this way. If you really, really wanted to be a great basketball player and you practiced a lot and you put a lot of time and effort into it, of course you would want results. But let's say you never really got that good. And so all this time and energy that you sacrificed, you may conclude was not really worth it because you didn't improve a whole lot, or at least as much as you wanted to as a basketball player. If that situation had happened, would you blame the sport of basketball? Would you say basketball owes you something? And for that matter, think of any kind of activity that you can engage in and potentially get good at. If you didn't get good at it, would you blame that activity? If I wanted to become a great chess player and I spent hours and hours researching and playing the game and learning the game, reading books on it, and I still never really performed that well, or at least not to my expectations, would I say, damn it, chess, you owe me this. I should be better. That is the same exact thing that you're doing with compulsive gambling. You're looking at gambling as if it were a person that owes you something. And that's part of the reason why compulsive gamblers are so emotionally attached or enmeshed with this activity, because this activity has really done damage to their ego. It shouldn't, but it has, because you believe that this activity is like a person taking advantage of you and that it owes you something. When in reality, it's nothing more than an activity that produces very random results. I'll give you another example that I think is more closely related to the activity of gambling. Let's say you were flipping a coin, heads or tails, and you wanted it to land on heads 70 out of the 100 times that you're going to flip it. Now, we know that's a long shot because the odds of getting ahead is 50%. So 70% is quite a departure from that average. But let's just say that's what you wanted to happen. That was the expected result. After 100 times of flipping this coin, if heads only came up 55% of the time, would you get mad at the coin? Would you say that it owed you this result? Of course not. The problem with gambling is that so often people look at this activity as not so random, that there is a way or a method to be good at it. And a lot of times people's, as I said before, egos are very attached to it. And so when they're not good at it, they have a choice. They can either blame themselves or blame the activity, right? It's kind of like a sore loser who blames the game if they lose, right? You essentially become a sore loser, but there's no justification for it because this isn't a game of skill. This is a game of luck. And a game of luck, no matter how hard you try, is going to be random. And certainly with some types of gambling, there is much more skill involved than others, right? Certain types of investing, poker, even sports betting to a degree. But a large part of it is random. And regardless, going back to my analogy with basketball, which certainly is a game of skill, even if it had to do with skill, you still can't blame the activity. Rather than blaming the activity, you have to take responsibility for your behavior. You have to own that you allowed yourself to get caught up in this compulsive gambling pattern. Now, I know people with this addiction are vulnerable and they have limited control. But I definitely do not believe that people with an addiction have no control. If that were true, then people would never overcome it. Maybe you need help, but there is a way of gaining control over yourself or taking back control. It can happen. I know because I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people who have taken back control of their lives. So if you really want to put an end to this, aside from all the other different kinds of skills and strategies that I've discussed in prior pieces of content that I've put out, this one is very, very important as well. And this has to do with accepting your past losses, which has to do with accepting your behavior and taking personal responsibility for it, and stopping this irrational quest to get back at gambling or take revenge on this gambling activity. I want to digress for a moment here because I think this next topic is very applicable to what we're discussing. A lot of you may say, but wait a minute, what about all those sports books that target compulsive gamblers? And we know this, they do. They have their statistical programs that can pinpoint who has an issue with this and who doesn't. It's very simple. And a lot of times they will target them in a very predatory fashion. They'll front them $1,000 to gamble with that they have to use for gambling because they know 90% or higher chance that this compulsive gambler is not going to stop when they spend that money. They're going to then start fueling this addiction with their own money, right? They're going to start inserting their own funds into the account and gambling with their own money and losing a bunch. And that's exactly what these analysts have figured out. And you might say, like, well, what about that situation? Like, I do want to take revenge on these people that have targeted me. And what I'd say to that is, you're absolutely right. This predatory behavior is despicable. And right now, the legalization of gambling has become the wild, wild west. And hopefully in the future, we'll have better regulations for this kind of bad behavior that the sports books engage in. But let me just say this. Your compulsive gambling predates this. These people didn't start targeting you out of the blue when you started gambling. You got targeted because of a long-standing compulsive gambling pattern. And your revenge also predates these people trying to lure you back into gambling. For the longest time, way before this predatory behavior started happening, for the longest time, you have been hell bent on revenge. And your revenge has primarily always been focused on the actual activity of gambling, which is, again, very, very irrational. Another point I want to make about the predatory practices of these sports books is that these sports books, they're not targeting you for personal reasons. They don't know you at all. They're not looking at you as a person that needs to be taken advantage of. They're simply looking at you as a number. So they don't even look at you as a person. They look at you as a number. You're just a number to them. You're just a statistic to them that has shown there's a good chance that they can profit by targeting you. And so there's really no reason to take this predatory behavior so personally, because anybody with a compulsive gambling issue or anyone who exhibits this kind of behavior is going to be targeted. And again, I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong. But I also think that it's irrational to be so revengeful towards the sports books and towards this activity, when at the end of the day, nobody is forcing you to do this. And so it comes down to taking responsibility, and it comes down to stopping your constant blaming of gambling and what it's done to you. Once you start accepting responsibility for your behavior, as well as the consequences that have happened because of it, you're gonna be on your way to finally taking back control. This is Dr. Fields. I hope you found this helpful. If so, please let me know. And I wish you all the success beating this addiction.